Question?
My name is Sophia. I'm doing resource environmental management and law. My question is directed towards Peter. You mentioned sort of projections for Australia's population into the next sort of half century. And you mentioned the importance of population and a possible increase for the economy and production and productivity. What do you think, though, is the optimum in that respect? What do you think is the optimum population for Australia from your point of view?
Yeah, again, I don't, within the time frame that we can think of, I don't think we can think of what the optimum population for Australia is, and I think it's a very, very loose concept that we have to adjust to what the population is going to be in many ways. You can't plan population to be something precise. Well, after 2050, the world's population is going to fall. Well, do we want it to stay flat at 9 billion? We have to adjust to the fact that it's going to fall. Countries around the world are now adjusting to Russia, for example. The Russian population is dropping by about 1 million a year now. If it continued to drop at that rate, it's 137 million, or it takes 137 million years to completely disappear. Russia is trying to do something about that, to slow that down. But in the end, they're going to have to adjust to falling population. And Europeans have to adjust to falling population. We're going to have to adjust to a rising population, is what I'm making. So that, I don't, within this kind of, I just think it's too loose a concept. That there's a notion that population can be determined, just like that. But that's not the reality. Population is an outcome of a lot of other forces, which are not so easily controlled. And so, to be a little inconsistent with myself, it is important to control rampant population growth, of course, and that's what we've been doing. In the 1960s, when we were making projections of the world's future population by 2050, the projected official UN projections of the world's population by 2050 made in the 1960s were 16 billion. We're now projecting 9 billion. So human activity in the last, or inactivity, human activity in the last 40 years has reduced 7 billion people off what is going to be the world's population. That is a phenomenal achievement, which nobody recognises. It's one of the greatest achievements in human history to have got our population under that control. And we've done it through promoting family planning and smaller families. And the arguments that did that were economic arguments. They were not environmental arguments. They were economic arguments that it was bad for the economy to have rampant population growth. It was bad for individual families to have huge numbers of children. They were strong economic arguments that brought that about.
Question? Sorry, you?
Directed to Peter again. You mentioned bringing Pacific people over to work on farms and that sort of thing. What kind of impact do you think it would have in relation to AIDS and HIV over in those countries where those people are living?
Yeah, well, that's an important question, particularly if we're talking about Papua New Guinea. I don't think the Australian government will move in the direction of Papua New Guinea initially in this regard. It'll have arrangements with Samoa and Tonga and some smaller Pacific countries, I would expect. But clearly you have to, in any migration program, you have to guard against any health issues like that, and particularly HIV/AIDS if it's people moving from PNG.
Hi, I'm Elle. I study science economics. In developing countries, they say that a large component of the HDI is actually GDP, or 1/3 of oil. How can you limit GDP in developing countries when you want them to actually get a higher standard of living?
I agree. If you think China's going to say, oh well, we'll stay poor, or India's going to say we're going to stay poor, no way. No, they are going to be looking at improving their standards of living. That's something we've got to deal with as a world issue, and it's going to happen. And we've got to find the best ways of adjusting to that within the confines of the environmental issues that we've been talking about. But to pretend that this is not going to happen, we can have 30 million people in Australia, as has been suggested, or we can have less than 6 billion people in the world, is stupid, because it's just not going to happen. You've got to face reality and try to get the best solution, looking at the population side, the environment side, the social side, etc.
I think my response would be 1950. If we all assumed a lifestyle of something like the 1950s, then the developing countries could grow to that. And if we change our lifestyle downwards, because I can't find a transition to that, then it might be possible to actually achieve a sustainable future and have everyone benefiting from technology. That figure of 1950 is a bit of a pluck. I haven't really done the numbers, but I think if you look at stuff like limits to growth, I suspect that's what the numbers would suggest as a sustainable level for everyone. I imagine that means that that's a date that's before anyone's experience here. Oh no, one. it's before mine. So I don't know whether that might or might not help paint a picture of what that means, but maybe it's one or less TV per family. It's certainly one or less car per household. Anecdotally, when you talk to people, they say that was a really good time. They were happier then. There are studies that show happiness decreasing or plateauing from that age.
Can you see people willing to shift back like that? Can you see a willingness in developed societies?
My short answer would be no. But if you ask what should we try to attain that everyone might be happy with, that would be it.
The second background. Third background.
My name is Jesse and I'm studying North Department of Management. I have a question for Peter. How can we realistically increase our population even if it's only 5 million if we're currently facing a water crisis?
Well, the water crisis is one of the crises. It's not the only crisis in infrastructure terms, but the exercise done by Graham's colleagues shows that we can easily handle 33 million people. When they did their first exercise, their peak population by 2050, I think, was 38 million, and they concluded that water would not be an issue so long as we do the right things. We can handle it, but the water problem is, there are water problems at the moment, and that's because we don't plan. We haven't planned. If you've got better planning, and we're moving into all kinds of new technologies and so on for water, and that'll have some impact. We're looking at conservation activities that will have some impact. But the vast majority of water is not used by the people. It's used in agriculture and it's used in industry. It's not used by people living in houses.
I can see 8 or 9 hands up as we're out of time, but remember to write down the question you would have asked in the learning portfolio. I want to give Alistair a full 10 minutes